Right, so hello and welcome back to episode 28 of the Bach and Arthur podcast. Today we have a very special guest, Darragh Ennis, an entomologist and neuroscientist working as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Oxford by day, and by night he's a chaser on the ITV game show The Chase, and he's known as the Menace. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming on.
The Menace is a very menacing name.
It is, but I didn't pick it, and I think it's just because it rhymes.
Yeah, so is D. Ennis the Menace, like Dennis the Menace?
Of course, yeah. That just completely went over my head.
That's why the producers are on such big money. You know,
they're brilliant.
Well, they did want to call me the professor, but I was working at the university at the time, and I thought that might have been a little bit cheeky to give yourself that title.
That would be cool, though, the professor.
Yeah. So tell us about the Chase, because that's where most people watching now would know you from. You've got quite an interesting story about how you became the chaser, right?
Yeah, I was on the show as a contestant. So I had just bought my first house, and I had spent, myself and my wife had spent literally our very last penny buying the house. We were completely broke. And when we moved in, the previous owner had removed the back door.
I remember you saying that was what you wanted to do with your prize money, fix the back door.
So it went out into the conservatory with no back door. It was freezing cold in the house. We had a curtain across the back door. It was terrible. And the conservatory couldn't even be locked, so you couldn't lock our house. So turns out doors are really expensive. Like, there's a lot of things in a house that you don't realize how expensive they are until you have to pay for them. So I went on a couple of quiz shows to try and win some money, and one of them was The Chase, and I won some money and paid for my back door. Yeah, it was a very bizarre sort of reason for going on the show, but it's genuinely what I needed.
Was that your first thought when you knew you need money for this door? You thought it's got to be quiz shows?
No, but I had already got into quizzing a little bit. I was in a quiz league, and they were sending around new shows, especially tend to send emails and things to quiz leagues to look for people to come on. And I'd applied for a couple. So I'd applied for one called Rebound, which I'd been on and didn't win any money, came second.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. And I said, this might be a way to win some money and get some stuff for the house. So I said, yeah, let's do it. And luckily enough, The Chase came along.
Yeah. How did that go about? Did you apply to be on The Chase, or do they find people?
Yeah, no, you apply. And they get way more applications than they could possibly need.
Yeah.
And they usually want a mix of different people. So they want people from different places. They want different genders, different ages, that kind of thing. So I applied and did an interview in Oxford, where I live. And luckily enough, they picked me. So yeah, kind of worked out.
Nice. And so there ended up being a bit of a prize money controversy. What happened there?
So people care way too much. This is one thing I've realized. So I went on the show, and I did quite well, and my team all took the low offer, which never happens. I went first, got some good money, put 9,000 into the bank, and the others all took either the low offer or negative offers. And people went absolutely bonkers about this. So it was the number one trending thing on Twitter in the UK. On the day they were debating Article 50 about leaving the European Union in Parliament, which goes to show the priorities people in this country have. I was a bigger trend. It was a huge controversy. I only got Twitter originally to post wedding photos for my friend's wedding. So my friend Peter got married. He had a great idea. Just use a hashtag, post them all up. That way we can collect them all really easily. Nice way to do it. So that was the only reason I had a Twitter account. And then people were being incredibly mean to my contestant, to my teammates, on this Chase. So I sort of waded in and said, look, leave them alone. It's really hard. I like these people. And when you're on a quiz show, you spend a really large portion of a day with these people, and you're kind of locked in a green room and you can't escape, and you get to know them quite well. They're lovely people. I really, really like them. And then everybody's being mean to them. And 99% of those people have never been intimidated on TV and don't realize how hard it is. So I had no ill feeling for them, and it kind of just blew up. But at that point, I was already in training to be the next chaser, which people didn't know, and they're all saying, "Oh, you should contact them. You should be a new chaser. You're really great." And I was like, so obviously had to keep lips sealed.
Yeah. How did that come about? So they obviously scouted you after you went on the Chase. Then is there like a process? You said training. Do they train you?
Yeah. So there was a kind of interview/training process. So it lasted nearly 2 years.
Wow.
So while I did very well on the show, there were huge gaps in my knowledge. Like, I was a very casual quizzer. I played in a quiz league, but that was it. I don't enter competitions or anything like that. So they identified my weaknesses and said, look, go away, work on this. We'll ask you some questions on it in a few months. And every few months I would go down to the production offices and they'd do, you know, they'd have cameras like this on me and they'd ask me lots and lots of questions from either unaired episodes of the show or really old episodes of the show, just to see how I do. And anything that I did wrong, they'd identify, you know, how I could have done better, and sort of built it up over time. And there was a few people having the same thing done. You know, I wasn't the only person under consideration, but a couple of us made it to screen tests in the studio, which was very weird. I got to wear Sean Wallace, the Dark Destroyer's outfit, because it was the one that I'm about the same size as Sean. He's a lot more muscular than me, but about the same height. And, you know, I sat in the chair and we did a mock show with Brad and some of the crew, and and they offered me the job. It was great.
And how do you go about like brushing up on your general knowledge? I've read about people who do a lot of these quiz shows that they basically go on Wikipedia, read an article, and then just pick one of the blue links and click on that and just spend hours and hours just constantly reading articles. How do you do it?
That's one way to do it. So Paul Tina does that. He does deep dives in Wikipedia. And if you ever listen to his podcast, which is great, by the way, he does loads of facts that are linked together in interesting ways. And that comes from how he studies. But you learn lists, you do lots of quizzes. You know, on the train down here, I have a book of notes in my bag, which is now very tatty. I wrote it myself. I need to get it rebound. And it's like, I've just been going through, you know, authors of books and trying to memorize things like that. And you come up with mnemonics and different ways of remembering things. But the problem is a lot of people ask you because they want to improve. It's individual. It depends on how your mind works. So you have to find what works for you. So some people just learn the list. You know, they memorize it straight down. They spend a couple of hours. They learn the Oscar winners lists or whatever. But some quizzers don't like that. You know, Kevin Ashman from the Eggheads is like the top quizzer in Britain generally. He hates learning lists. He just does lots of quizzes and remembers the questions. So it's down to yourself, really.
Where would you find those? Like you say, you can do quizzes to like practice and stuff. Where would you find them? Is it online or?
So I'm in the Oxfordshire Quiz League, so I'm in a quiz team there. I do the Irish Online Quiz League. There's World Cups. There's if you're in London, the QLL. If you want to do in person. There's the Online Quiz League, OQL. I'm on a team in that as well. Anybody can join that. And then there's loads of websites that do like type-in quizzes you can do on your own. There's WikiQuiz, which is where quizzers put up their own quizzes, so it's all very nerdy. Sporkle. I don't know if anybody knows Sporkle anymore.
I've heard of Sporkle.
Sporkle is an online quiz and trivia game website, and you can do, and they've got tens of thousands of quizzes. So if you want to learn the capitals of the world, it's the best place to do it, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I did that for a while to get every country, learn every country and all the different continents.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I was just one of those things that I really wanted to know. I want to do flags next.
Flags are hard.
I know,
Flags are hard.
But because there's just only like a certain number, it's like once you've got them, I feel like, you know, you should just know them.
Do you have a good memory for it? Like, can you still remember the?
I don't know. That was a question I was going to ask you. Do you think that people like in your position as like a chaser, do you think it comes mainly from hard work, or is it a mix of natural talent? Do you think you've got a special memory?
It's a mix of both, but anybody can improve. Literally anyone can improve. There's a great book called Moonwalking with Einstein, which is about a journalist who was doing a story on the World Memorization Championships. And those guys are like way out there. They learn, you know, the orders of a deck of cards and really long lists of numbers and all this kind of thing. And they do it really quickly. But a lot of people use things like memory palancing techniques. So the journalist decided, I'm going to try and enter as part of the story. So he did all of the training. And he actually did okay. Like, he didn't win it or anything, but he did reasonably well in the competition. By following the techniques the others do, he went from a relatively normal person who normally would, you know, forget everything, to being able to memorize lists of things. It's possible. Our brains are mad. You know?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I feel like I could benefit from something like that, because I feel like I've got the worst memory.
You just link facts together and make them more interesting to you. And like some of the things that you do don't make sense outside of your own head.
Yeah.
So today I was doing books on authors, and I realized I'd forgotten who'd written the Jack Frost detective novels. So, you know, the one with David Jason in the TV. So that was R.D. Wingfield. And I've put a picture in my mind of a bird flying over a frosty field. So it's wing, field, frost. And that, for a lot of people, that'll just go away, but that won't go away now. I will remember that pretty much for the rest of my life. And if you can make things a bit more interesting, if you can connect them together, it makes it an awful lot easier to remember them.
Yeah. Have you always done quizzes and stuff like that?
No.
Whenabouts did that come into your life?
So about 15 years ago, when I first moved to England, I was involved with a Gaelic football club, Era Og in Oxford, and they have a quiz team in the quiz league, that Oxfordshire Quiz League. And I lived near to the pub that was their home venue. They were short a player and said, "Do you want to come along? We need someone." And I went along, and it was really good fun. So I kept doing it. That was the complete level of my quiz interaction until I ended up on the chase.
Yeah.
I didn't do any of the competitions, any of that kind of stuff. And weirdly, by coincidence, Paul Sinha played on the exact same team, but years before I'd ever been on the show. Just by very, very niche thing. He played a couple of games for them years and years
wicked.
ago.
Okay. So did you play Gaelic football as well?
Yeah, but played is a very strong. I am not athletic at all. I never really played at home. I played in Canada when I lived there for a few years.
Yeah.
And the standard was fairly low. There was rolling substitutions. You could get away with a lot more. And then I came to the UK. It's a great way to make friends, joining a sports team. So I joined the sports team. I think I only actually played in 3 games because I was getting to the point where I was getting older. My knees stopped working. My back stopped working. And for those of you who don't know, Gaelic football is not like soccer. It is extremely physical. And if you're not in good shape, if you're broken, it will do bad things. So I ended up joining the committee and, being on the organisation side of things. Now I mostly do fundraising for them.
Okay, nice.
All right, well, back to the chase quickly. So you were the contestant. There was the bit of the prize money controversy. Did they set up a GoFundMe to give you back some of the money that you essentially lost out on from the contestants' choices?
So the big thing that a lot of people don't understand about the show and they don't get is the money isn't real until it's won. It's just numbers on a screen. It's pretend. Until a team wins, there is no money. That's what I mean. The money's in a big bank account for ITV or something, but until you win, it's nothing. So people get all caught up on the offers and negatives. None of it matters. It's only winning that counts. And I firmly believe that I got exactly what I deserved. We won in a team. But people were like, "Oh, we need to get him his $9,000." That $9,000 wasn't real, So they put a GoFundMe together. Actually got, I think, £1,000 or something similar. It was a reasonably large amount of money, but I gave it away. Like, it wasn't my money.
Oh, that's a really good mindset to have about it as well.
Yeah.
There's not going to be any sleepless nights.
Yeah, like I would have felt bad. So I gave it to charity instead because I just thought that was a better home for it than me. And again, at that time, I was already on the way to getting what is an absolute dream job. So, I would have felt doubly bad taking money off people. And then in a few months later, I didn't think about this at the time, but I just, in retrospect, the optics of me taking like £1,000 of donated money when I was already getting like a really cool job would have been a bit rough.
Then they see you on the screen.
Did you pick a charity in particular that was particularly close to home?
I gave it to Helen and Douglas House in Oxford, which is an end-of-life care for young people who have terminal illnesses. And they're a lovely charity. And I sponsored them. I sort of subscribed to them and I give them money. And so I just thought it was a nice thing to do. Rather than keep it for myself and buy another door.
Oh, that's really good. And then, so about 3 years later, you make your chase debut.
Yeah.
And it's the most viewed episode ever, is that correct?
It was.
4.9 million views. Broke the record at the time,
I
did
broke
it?
the record at the time.
Yeah.
I think it's second or third now. But it was a big buzz because we hadn't had a new chaser for a few years. It was the middle of lockdown, which kind of helped. Everybody was at home. And, it was a big splash. And they'd kind of led up to it with the mystery chaser in the preceding episode. So it really built up, not just my episode, but the ones before and after it. And it was a huge big splash. It was very weird for me.
I can imagine, yeah.
So imagine your first day out of lockdown when you go to a thing or you get on the tube and you're going, this is strange. I don't, that kind of, everything was otherworldly.
Yeah.
I walked out and I was famous. So I went from not interacting with anyone to people like constantly asking me for photographs and wanting to talk to me. So it was very bizarre.
It's a big lifestyle change.
How is that? How do you deal with that now?
Most of the time, it doesn't really matter. I don't live a celeb lifestyle. I have a fairly normal life. I bring my kids to school. I do all that kind of stuff. But if I go anywhere where I'm out at a night out, or if I'm away with my friends, we go away every May, bank holiday, and we go to places like, the Costa del Sol and stuff. I just get absolutely bombarded with people talking to me and asking me for photographs and all that.
Do people ask you general knowledge questions as well?
They do.
You're the chase.
They
In
do
1947.
sometimes. But the thing is, people are really, really, really bad at thinking up questions on the spot.
Yeah.
I just realised
Yeah.
that when I just
tried to do it
So
himself.
I just said 1947 and then just laughed.
they almost always default to capital cities. Don't know why. This appears to be a thing that people think is standard
Yeah.
general knowledge. And of the most sort of popular countries, I know like at least 150 or 160 off the top of my head because
Yeah.
they come up in quizzes all the time. If you're going to ask a capital city one, ask one of the really tricky ones, like one of the tiny island nations or one of the Caribbean countries, because they're all sans something and it's really easy to mix them up. But yeah,
Yeah.
people go, you know, what's the capital of Spain? And it's the first thing that comes into their mind. So yeah.
You're going to have to learn those really niche ones now because you know people are going to be asking
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
yeah.
on a very, very long list of what I have to learn.
Yeah, do you make like a priority list in terms of things that you want to learn?
Yeah, and things that I need to revisit as well. So
Okay,
if I
wow.
start getting things wrong, so the detective novels things, I did an online quiz, realized I didn't know who wrote the Jack Frost novels. Went, oh, actually, I'm a bit, and I mixed up some of the others in my head. I went, it's been a few years, so I need to revisit that. And I have a sort of list thing on my phone, and I just put down lists of things, and then whenever I've got a bit of time, I go over them.
You crack through them. Wow.
There was something because looking through TikTok for sort of like the biggest clips of you, one of them is when you went on the Jackmate podcast and you spoke about people being able to contest answers on the chase. Do you want to quickly just tell us about that? And then I have a question that...
There's this weird idea that people have is that it's not edited. You know, they think it goes out as is and that we record it all in one take. That is very clearly not true. So writing questions for a quiz is really difficult because there's always something you might miss. There might be a second answer that's also correct. There might be technically something wrong with the question. If there is, on the Chase and pretty much every other quiz show, there's usually an independent adjudicator. On the Chase, it's a company called Beyond Dispute, and they are independent of ITV, independent of the production company. You go, actually, I have a problem with that question. And I did this the other day when I was recording. During the final, I said, sorry, I've a bit of a problem with that question. Can we get it checked? And they come on and they make sure everything is checked very, very carefully. They give a full explanation to both the chaser and the team. And then it goes back to the point, the single frame, so the one, whatever it is, 24th of a second, where you had stopped the quiz. And it goes back to that point and you go, okay, and then they start again. So it's all very, very carefully checked. It's all independent. They also independently see the two sets of questions at the end. So when they say, have you picked set A or set B? That's literally set A and set B, two different pieces of paper. So it's all done. It's all very carefully above board. Largely because it's a crime if it's not.
Yeah.
That's the weird thing, you know, and quiz winnings are tax-free
Yeah.
as well. So not only is it a crime as in fraud, it's tax fraud. And if there's one person who will come after you, it's the tax man.
That is true.
Is there like a big moment where you remember challenging a question and either being very right or very wrong and it being or does it happen just so frequently that it's just
It's not a big thing. It happens a lot.
it happens a lot?
So the contestants don't tend to do it as much, I think, just out of confidence. But because of our position that we know how it all works and we tend to have bigger sort of background knowledge around the questions, I tend to question the science ones quite a bit because I am a scientist. And question writers who have the hardest job, by the way, because we're never happy. We say we're awful to them. We really are. They try their very best to balance sets and we go, oh, you're so bad at this. But the science questions can have very, very technical answers, and sometimes things have about 10 different names. So if I give out a different name that's marked as wrong, they just might not have put it on the list, you know, because Brad's got a few accept answers. And I go, sorry, I need to challenge that. That is technically correct because.
Yeah.
And that's where I would come in most of the time. But I only challenge maybe one every couple of shows.
Oh, okay.
Every 3 shows.
Really
it's
not
not
that
all the time.
frequently.
The question writers are genuinely brilliant at their job. So they do really well, but sometimes something slips through.
I can imagine how difficult it would be actually to even come up for the quiz itself. Because like you say, if you try and think of a question on the spot, it's so difficult to think of something that would be difficult enough that would challenge you and challenge the team that are competing against you.
But they don't even have to think of just questions. They have to think of categories of questions.
Yeah.
So there's like, I don't know how many there are. We tend to think there's about 4 or 5 from easiest to hardest. So there's ones that are absolute tap-ins that everybody should know, really easy, you know, what color is grass most of the year? Green, boom, that kind of question.
Yeah, he's good.
And then, but then you get sort of ones that you need to have a little think about. There's ones where you need to have some specific knowledge. And then there's ones that are just really, really, really hard, you know. And if we do change a question, they have to substitute in a similar level question.
Okay.
And the two sets of questions, A and B, have to have the same number of levels. So they have to assess, and that's really hard to do because some things are easy to people because of their just background and their knowledge. So they have to assess, what does the general public, the average person, know about this, and how hard is it for the average person?
Yeah.
And you think some things are dead easy, you know, but they're not. So, you know, let's say a question about, you know, a TikToker or a YouTuber, depending on your age, that is an easy or an impossible question.
That's true.
You know, so how do you assess that? How do you say, is that hard? Is it easy? Is it minimal?
Yeah.
You know,
That's
so
true.
there's a lot to be done with, and specifically on the chase, they have a different range of people. So this is one of the main reasons why teams, that all four of them get back to the final win, is that they're able to do pushbacks. So if I get asked about something, you know, music from the last couple of years, I'm not very strong on that. It's not my thing. If they've got an 18 or a 19-year-old on the team, they're going to absolutely smash that question. But if two people in their 50s and 60s get back, they're not going to know it either. So, you know, that it's a very difficult job being a question writer.
Yeah, I could imagine. Even like, even because it's not really like an objective thing, is it? Like you said, it is very subjective. What's an easy question? What's a difficult question? Yeah.
And speaking of like social media stuff,
Yeah.
you are quite a hit on TikTok.
Weirdly, yes. Which kind of, again, I say this a lot. A lot of stuff happens by accident for me. I started TikTok because one of my nephews told me it would be a good idea.
Yeah.
And I was already posting stuff on Instagram and Twitter's kind of died a bit. So I barely use Twitter anymore. But I said, yeah, sure, why not? And it turns out I'm about 10 times more popular on TikTok than I am on any of the others. So yeah, it's kind of taken off. And I don't understand TikTok. I don't browse it. I don't subscribe to very many people. I don't follow. The only people I follow are people I actually know personally.
Yeah.
I don't get it as a platform myself. But yeah, people seem to like me on it.
It's an
Yeah.
interesting one, TikTok, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
'Cause it's like even the people you do follow, you don't necessarily see their stuff. It sort of just feeds you what it wants to feed you.
It tries to learn from you.
Yeah.
And the thing that I don't understand about it is there's no initial steering point. You don't go into it and go, you know, I would like to watch videos about this, or you don't get to browse in some way where you cherry pick. You have to actively browse the platform for
everything.
it to learn what you want.
that's true. Because at least when you sign up for Twitter, it says you are science, sports, news,
all that kind of stuff, and it tries to skew it. So one of the problems is that when I first started opened it, I browsed it. I really, really stupidly put my phone down. Someone was talking to me, and I left it open. I think it was on like a blackhead squeezing thing or something awful. And then
classic.
anytime I tried to open it, it just showed me that
just
because it's
that,
gone, you spent 25 minutes looking at that one video.
8-second video.
so-
you watched it 1,000 times.
Yeah, so I essentially have stopped. I don't tend to actually watch it, but I interact with people on it a lot. I actually like. I'm weird enough. A lot of people don't like it, but I like dealing with people, and I also really enjoy blocking people who are being abusive to me. It
Really
makes me feel
enjoy
great.
it.
The power you hold. Yeah. Because you post the kind of content that I would like to post one day. Like you do a lot of interesting science and just sort of educate people in like a really fun way.
Yeah.
I saw a recent one. I saw it come up and I saw it did so well. And I was like, rather than watching this, I'd ask you on the podcast. There was something that you went viral talking about magpies.
Yeah.
That everyone just found really interesting. And I'm sure that was another way you were like, why out of all of them? Like, does something on magpies?
Yeah, I try sometimes. I really try to like script very interesting stuff, and I put a lot of effort into it, and I have props and I do experiments, and it goes flat. But the magpie thing took off. So
That always happens. The more you try with a video.
it's one of these things where, you know, people think magpies are unlucky. And it's like, why? Why do you think magpies are unlucky? Why do we have the rhymes? You know the rhymes? Like 1 for sorrow, 2 for joy, all that.
3 for a girl, 4 for a boy. Yeah.
And it keeps going.
What are the rest? Do you know the rest?
There's 1 for sorrow, 2 for mirth, 3 for a funeral, 4 for a birth, 5 for heaven, 6 for hell, 7 for the devil, his own self. But there's regional ones of this, and there's like dozens, if not hundreds of different variations. And they go back really, really far. Like the first record of it is, I think it's 300 years old or 250 years old or something. So this is a long standing thing. And I'm fascinated by it. I think it's fascinating, but I didn't think anybody else would be. I thought it would just be one of those things. But people really got into it. They were posting their own things. They're talking about how they salute magpies and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. And I think it comes down to, they're crows, so they're kind of carrion birds. They tend to steal stuff because they like shiny things. That's not a myth. They do steal stuff. So I think people don't like them because of that. And it just became wide in the consciousness, and especially in the UK and Ireland, it seems to be a big thing about magpies and rhymes.
Yeah. I always salute them. I think it's my grandparents taught. Yeah. You'd like ask them how their wife and children are, then you'd salute them.
To the magpie.
Yeah. Hello, Mr. Magpie. How's your wife? How's your children? Lots of people
and then you
said
salute
that,
them,
and would salute them. I had a friend crash off his bicycle because he
just
a
had
magpie.
to
No way.
And one of my grandmothers, if she saw a single magpie, would not leave the window until she saw a second one.
Wow.
She was so superstitious.
So it is really, and it's different in cultures as well, actually, because I can't remember if I was watching like Antiques Roadshow or something, and they had a piece where it was like magpies and cherry blossoms and stuff, and apparently in Asia they really like magpies, whereas over here we see them more as like a pest.
Yeah.
And then in Australia they're
like
mental,
a bad omen.
They're a different species in Australia.
Is that what it is?
But they are absolutely like out there.
Yeah,
Australian
crazy.
Magpies dive bomb people. They attack them for food. Yeah. Basically, Australia, if you think animal here versus animal in Australia, the one in Australia is going to be dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's more valid than if they've got a reason to. And because you're a man of science, are you a superstitious, or have you got any sort of supernatural beliefs at all?
I'm actually substitious. I think I am the opposite. I don't believe in anything. I don't believe in luck, fate, any of those. I just can't. I look at any situation and there's a better scientific explanation for everything, and whenever you ask, there's a standing prize of like $1 million. I can't remember what it's called, for anyone that can prove, psychic abilities, and it's been around for decades and no one has claimed it.
Yeah.
You have things like there's a psychic conference that was called off because, at the last minute, and they still turned up. That kind of thing.
They still turned.
Yeah, like there's never,
due to unforeseen circumstances, the psychic convention's called off.
The weird thing is most people don't believe in most superstitions.
Yeah,
but they think their personal superstitions are definitely true.
Yeah.
And that's the bit that gets me. It's like, I don't believe in knock on wood. That's absolutely nonsense. But if you spill salt, you have to throw it over your shoulder. It's like, why?
Yeah, why cherry pick?
So I think a lot of it's cultural. A lot of it's, you inherit it from your parents and things. But I don't believe in any of it.
Yeah. I feel like the more scientific minded you are, the less likely you are to with
I know a lot of scientists who are really superstitious.
Really?
Superstitious, really?
It's the weird thing. It tends to be, if you're a scientist, you either don't believe in God at all or you really, really believe.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same with superstitions. I had quite a lot of scientists who did very, very weird things. Like my friend Lou, when she set a timer once by mistake for 27 minutes instead of 30, her experiment worked better. So she never set it for 30 ever again. It was always 27.
Wow, that's so
And
bizarre.
I was like, but that doesn't make any sense. You know that? And she's like, no, you don't change the thing. You have to keep it. You have to use the same marker. You have all that kind of stuff. So they have, even within their scientific work, would be very superstitious.
Wow,
That's interesting. Yeah.
They call it methodical, but they're actually superstitious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there definitely is a sort of like trend you can see in terms of religiosity sort of decreases. But it was interesting because I was reading about this recently, and it tends to be people in biology and physics tend to be far less religious than people in chemistry.
Really?
Because obviously, I think the thinking was, or at least the way the author of this article described it, was if you're dealing with physics, you know very well about the Big Bang and how the universe began. Well, not how, but the beginning of the universe, and the difficulties of asking what happened before the Big Bang, if that's even a question to ask, and that sort of thing. And then if you're in biology, you're well versed on evolution, and perhaps Adam and Eve is going to be a more difficult thing to accept. But with chemistry, there's not really a necessary understanding that quite is so, I guess, anti-religious.
I guess so. Maybe at like the basic level.
It's the difference is quite more significant than you think. It's not
That's
just
quite
off by a few percent.
actually.
It's like I don't know if you found that as because obviously you're
I
You're
was
in
always in biology. So
yeah.
physics was not my thing.
Right.
I didn't really get it that well, and I did chemistry for a year.
Yeah.
But I really struggled with organic chemistry. Drove me crazy, so I actually dropped that. But I've found it's just weird that there's no middle ground. This is the thing that bothers me. Now, I think science tends to attract people who are a bit obsessive anyway. So I found that there's very few agnostics in science. There's very few, considering the people who search for knowledge literally is their job. People who search for knowledge of God are actually quite rare in my experience. It was the definitive atheists, or the, you know, every Sunday going to mass and, you know, thanking God for their grant kind of people. It was never anything in the middle. And that's the bit I find weird, because it's the opposite of what scientists are.
That's very true.
You know, you question everything as a scientist. That's kind of the gig. But when it came to religious beliefs, they didn't.
Yeah.
I found that weird.
That's interesting. There's a really big evolutionary biologist in the US called Forrest Valkai. Have you ever come across him?
No.
He's great on TikTok as well. I think he's called Renegade Science Teacher, and he's got sort of like 1.6 million followers, and he does like fantastic videos, and he's now moved across to YouTube. But in his time, he's become a bit more, he goes on sort of like atheist talk shows and gets people to call in with their like more scientific minded questions to, you know, try and reconcile, I guess, their faith and science a lot, which a lot of people can. Like you say, there's a lot of people, I don't mean to be dismissive when I say that, you know, biology and physics may be, you know, turn people away from religion. You know, there's plenty of people that believe in it, are both scientists. What was I going to say about Forrest?
I don't know.
I had a big old
You
disclaimer
sounded
there.
like you were going somewhere with that.
Yeah,
I was waiting.
What was it you were just saying before?
I think it was about belief in God and
There's not many agnostics.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
and that was what he said. He just found it really fascinating that a lot of the people he worked with in science are like that, with pretty much everything in their life and sort of the standard of evidence they'd expect to, you know, believe something. And he just finds it astonishing that they don't necessarily have the same sort of skepticism towards their religion. But, you know, again, maybe I'm sure there are plenty of people who are incredibly skeptical and have still found that they have sufficient evidence to believe. So
Yeah.
But there's also, like, outside of religion, scientists do get fixed in their thought patterns, and they take certain things to be absolutely true. And if someone challenges that, they go, no, absolutely not. So there's been plenty of incidences of scientists literally being laughed at for like things that they've shown and saying, oh, you're clearly wrong because that would go against big person X who's proved this. You know, like Newton's laws of physics were largely countermanded, or at least added to and changed a bit by Einstein. You know, things aren't fixed. You look at the evidence and you keep going, but people are people. You have foundational beliefs, and that helps what sets you up. And some atheist scientists are almost religious atheist scientists. You know, it's become such a core part of their being that they will reject anything that goes against their fundamental beliefs. You know, that it has happened. It's happened on many occasions.
yeah, tends to be the case with a lot of the groundbreaking things in science, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we spoke briefly about it once because there was a megalodon tooth in a museum, and there was a whole thing about it, about how like groundbreaking it was, and how biologists just initially, I'm sure you'll know far better than I do, about how initially sort of there was this, you know, hierarchy of beings, and there was sort of, you know, people didn't really believe that species like came into and exited from existence and stuff like that. And it took a lot of evidence before scientists turned around and went, actually, there's, you know, something to this.
Oh, yeah. There's loads of things like that. You know, like when the first dinosaur sort of femurs were found, and they were sure they were, well, to put bluntly, testicles of giant humans because of the shape at the end of the femur and things like that. You know, there's been plenty of times where the definitive rules have been flipped. You know, continental drift, when that was first put out, like, again, absolutely laughable. And now the evidence is so obvious when you look at it, the shape of the continents.
Yeah.
We can watch the continents move apart. You know, and you have to be open to new evidence. Your position has to be based on the evidence. The evidence has to be solid, first of all. So there's a lot of, you know, evidence in inverted commas out there. But if you've got good, reliable evidence that your core beliefs may be wrong or may be slightly wrong, you have to be open to changing them, because otherwise we never advance. We'll just stick. And this is one of the main reasons why this is a particular bugbear of mine, is that senior professors and top people in science should be made to retire.
Yeah.
Do you think?
Yes.
How come?
Because once you get to a certain age, the vast majority of people are less willing to accept new ideas. Also, they've got a lot of connections, a lot of power, and they use up a lot of the grant money. So because they know everybody on all the boards, and they've got this huge history of doing brilliant science. Now, I don't think they should retire out of science, but I think they shouldn't be at the top of it anymore. They should be in advisory capacity. There should be new positions made for senior professors where they can, mentor people. They can go back to the bench and start doing experiments again, which they all say they want to do, but none of them ever do.
Yeah.
And give them that opportunity. But I think you have to have a turnover of people in every industry, not just science. New young people have to come in to replace older people and to bring in fresh ideas. Otherwise, you get stuck. And I think science is in real sort of danger of that at the moment.
Yeah, no, I like that idea, especially applying it to every industry, because every industry could benefit from that.
Yeah, you could have, a senior professor who's got 30, 40 years experience running their lab, and they could become, an advisor to 3 or 4 junior professors. That's what they could do. They could go back on the bench. They could directly supervise a PhD student with all of their experience. They could set up a mini group looking at something bonkers that they've always wanted to do but could never get a grant for. They could take up a lot of the lecturing load because of their experience, and then the younger professors who are trying to set up their lab would have less to do.
Yeah.
There's so much more that a senior professor can do, but they just stay. And some of them, especially not here so much, but in the US, you're talking about people well into their 80s, still getting big grants and still running big labs.
Yeah.
And I'm not knocking them. They're probably doing great work. They're probably doing really significant work, but it's not new.
Yeah.
Very rarely it's new.
Do you think they get to a point where they're more concerned with with the legacy they've built to take a new risk or something like that?
Also, there's an ego thing. I don't think I think they go, who are these people to say that my work is not significant? I've done significant things, and some of them have won prizes and have millions and millions of pounds worth of funding, and they've done great stuff. I'm not saying they're bad. I'm just saying it's not new.
Yeah.
My boss, so Ilan, who I worked for nearly 14 years, was very, very rare in that he regularly changed what he did. Now, he used largely the same methodology. He brought in new techniques and things, but he started out doing, embryo patterning, went into, RNA biology was always his thing, and he went into, embryo development and growth. And then he went into neuroscience, and now he's gone into super advanced imaging and stuff.
Yeah.
Because he got a bit bored by it and he wanted to do new stuff. So he was perfectly willing to flip into new systems and new models. But there are entire scientists, especially that I know of from biology, who are effectively doing exactly the same thing that they did in the same tissues of the same animal, just from a slightly different perspective. And they're churning out lots of cool data, and it's interesting, but it's not groundbreaking anymore. I think if we really want to groundbreak, we need to get young people into positions that they're not getting into.
Yeah, that is a really interesting.
Sorry, it's got very serious, didn't it?
No, but
That's interesting. Very interesting.
It's good insight, actually. It's good insight into there.
I'm going to get absolutely slammed for that, by the way. That is not a popular opinion in the scientific community. I've raised that in discussion groups and have been very heavily criticized for that.
Really?
Which is fine. Everybody's entitled to opinions. That's the whole point. We had discussions about it. I was told that I was ageist, which I am absolutely not. I think there's different roles for different people. And I think, but whenever I brought this up, it was not a popular opinion.
I find that interesting because you're basically saying that it's good to encourage new research and keeping things fresh rather than getting stuck on the same things and not taking risks.
The systems change though.
Yeah.
So when these people were young, the number of people who went to university was much lower. The number of people who went on to postgrad was much lower. So the proportion of people who did a PhD in research who went on to run their own lab was actually quite high.
Yeah.
Now it's somewhere in the low percents. It's 1%, maybe even less than that.
Yeah.
So I was probably skewed. I was in Oxford. A lot more people tended to, but it's 1% or lower in the UK. So you're talking about a very, very small proportion of people who are doing research are able to get a lab.
Yeah.
And the competition for grants is higher than it's ever been. Loads of people aren't getting funded. And I think the chances of a young person with new ideas really trying something groundbreaking, because that's very risky to granting agencies as well. And the senior guys are the ones who are assessing these as well, by the way, just so you know. So they look at this young person who's doing something that's against what they do, and they just feel that's bad, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Naturally, I'm not saying they're not doing it in a conscious way. If you look at something that's very different to your own beliefs, you're going to be critical of it. And that tends to be what happens.
Yeah.
So I think there needs to be a different way of doing things, a turnover, a change in how it's all set up. The system doesn't work. And most people who get into research want to run their own lab, but the vast majority of them never ever do.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of research, am I right in saying that you're researching insects' brains?
Researched. I am no longer a researcher.
Oh, but you
Very
were
recently,
researching.
I was, yeah. So for 13, 14 years, I worked in the biochemistry department in Oxford looking at fly brains, yeah.
Wow. And what can you tell us about that?
The one thing that everybody is amazed by is they are remarkably similar to human brains.
Really?
Yeah. So when you get down to it, like they're obviously a lot smaller. So you're talking in the order of 10,000 neurons versus, billions. But the whole way that their cells work is almost exactly the same. And the good example of that, the one that we tell everybody because it's the most stark, if you mutate the gene in flies that is one of the causes of Parkinson's in humans, the flies tremor, they have a shake. And if you feed them the drug that you give humans, the tremors stop.
Okay. So
it's at a fundamental level, the nerve cells in a fly, which we are probably hundreds of millions of years distant from in evolution, the nerve cells have not changed that much. There's some changes. There really are. Like, some of the chemicals are different and all that kind of thing. But on a basic level, the brain cells of a fly work the same as yours do. So they're a really good model for research.
There was an interesting article recently published about the internal compass of a fly. Do you know much about this? And it was sort of speaking about how scientists were just really surprised at how few neurons it took for their navigation system to be as good as it is.
Yeah, well, if you think about it, they've got 10,000 neurons, so they have to be more sparing with them, and they've got very sophisticated eyesight. They've got, very complex movement behaviors. So there's actually less resources going around. So they have to be very, very efficient in that respect. But there's a project actually just very recently being published where lots of fly labs work together to map the entire fly connectome, how the different nerves are connected to each other. It actually made normal news. It was on like BBC and stuff. And they've mapped out all of the different things that are connected to each other, how the different pathways are linked throughout the entire brain. A spectacularly large project, which involved loads of labs all working together collaboratively. And this is probably one from that. So they're able to see really clearly which neurons in which parts of the brain fire when they're doing particular things. And the numbers, like for navigation, are tiny. It's like, is it single digits or tens or something like that? It's really, really small. It's fascinating.
Yeah. And what got you into that? What have you always had an affinity for insects in particular, or?
Okay. I know I say this a lot, but I got into it by accident. So I was a student and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was having a great time. I really enjoyed science. And
was this during your undergrad in biology?
Undergrad in biology in Maynooth in Ireland. And in third year, we had to decide what project to pick. And I really didn't know which one. But my friend got sick. So my friend Nadine got sick. She got the flu and she was meant to go on a fourth year field trip. So before term started, you went away on a field trip. And I went instead of her because one of the guys said, look, we're going tomorrow. Can you come? I said, yeah, sure. And I had the best time. It was an ecology field trip and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I was really, for the first time in my life, like I liked science. I did it. It was kind of like school, but I was really fascinated, genuinely fascinated. So I ended up working for the summer in that lab. I did my fourth year project there. They asked me, did I want to do a PhD? My PhD interview was, hey, Bones, do you want to do a PhD? That's my nickname, by the way. Hey, Bones, do you want to do a PhD? I said, yes. I did a PhD in that lab and I absolutely loved it. So if my friend Nadine hadn't got sick, I wouldn't have done it.
You wouldn't have done your entire PhD in ecology, do you not think, if you'd not gone on?
I might have done, but probably unlikely. I would have randomly picked something else. So yeah, the little sort of butterfly effect, insect thing made a huge, huge difference. So yeah, so that was it.
And so with ecology, that's organisms and interacting with each other in their environment, correct? And was your entire PhD in ecology focused on insects?
Insects and nematodes, so microscopic worms. So nematodes are a classic lab thing. You know, they were the first animal to get its genome sequenced, all that kind of thing. But when we were using them, there's ones that live in your soil and they live in pretty much all soils that kill insects. So they crawl inside the insect and they reproduce. It's kind of grisly and the insect dies. So we were using them, and you can buy them now. Actually, you can buy them to apply in your house.
I was going to say, I actually used them recently. Yeah.
So if you get fungus gnats in your house, you can buy them. You know, the little tiny black flies, and you just pour them in with your watering can. They kill all the larvae, so they don't come back. That research, a large part of the reason why they are now used, is because my lab, Laura in my lab, was working on the right species and strain to put into mushroom houses to kill fungus gnats. So that. There's a direct link there between those. But so we were using it in forestry. There's pine weevils attack pine trees, and we were applying nematodes to kill them. And I was working on sort of behavioral interactions between them, trying to figure out what's the best method to apply, when to apply them, how the insects react, all that kind of thing. And yeah, I was doing that for nearly 4 years. It was great.
Wow,
that's really interesting. Yeah, because I had fungus gnats on one of my plants, and I was looking up the best ways to get rid of them.
It's easily the best way.
Yeah,
it's by far the most effective.
And did it work?
Yeah, it worked.
It always works.
I will admit though, because I was living at my mum's at the time, and she had a plant with a similar issue, and she was like, I don't know if I want worms though in the soil. And I was like, yeah, but you're not going to see them. Like, you don't know
they're less than a millimeter long.
Yeah, exactly. She was like, yeah, but it kind of gives me the heebie-jeebies a little bit. So
it's an unsettling thought, just swapping one organism for another.
Could we not just apply some poison to it?
Exactly.
And actually, that was kind of the reaction. We were doing this for forestry, and when we tried to pitch this to like growers and stuff, they just said, no, can we just use the pesticides?
Really?
Well, again, you know, people are conservative. They don't want to take the risk.
Yeah.
They don't want to use what they know. It's a very low margin business with potential huge ramifications if you get it wrong.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially with forestry, you're talking about a 40-year investment. They're not going to take the risk. So
Yeah.
we found it very hard to convince people.
And once you put the nematodes in the soil, do they thrive there?
So it's called inundative biological control. That's
Yeah.
where you put so many in that they kill everything.
Okay.
What happens is they will crawl, the ones that crawl inside the insect will reproduce in like tens of thousands and release. And then when there's no more insects for them to kill, they need that to complete their life cycle. They can't become adults outside of an insect.
Okay.
So they just go dormant in the soil, and a lot of them will die. But if another insect comes and lays its eggs, they'll wake up and attack it.
Oh, so will it last like...
It can last for weeks or months. It depends on the conditions.
Yeah.
The problem with living things is, you know, it depends on temperatures, water, and all that kind of stuff. But under the right conditions, they can live for months and months at a time.
Wow. I find things like that really interesting when you find a way to like unlock, like without using poison or something, you can literally use nematodes to control.
Yeah,
like
and it's more
infestation.
effective as well, because you're talking about soil is such a difficult thing for, like, you can't just apply enough toxin to kill everything in it onto the soil, because you'll kill the plant and it'll be horrible for you. So so pesticides tend to work really well on surface, you know, insects. Things that live in the soil or live under bark of trees, which is where we were aiming. You have to have something that can actively seek them out, and they do it for you. So yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
No, they are really
Like a little biological army.
Yeah, they actually
Well,
are.
what armies aren't biological, but anyway. So, as a man of science,
yes,
you've now released a scientific book.
I have. Yeah,
Called The Body: 10 Things You Should Know.
Yeah, I have. And it's really good, if I do say so myself.
I kind of, knowing that you're coming on, like, we love speaking about loads of these types of things. I almost would love to sit here and just ask you everything that's in your book. But that's a bit of a spoiler. So if you guys want to find out what's in there, go check it out yourselves. Where's the best place for people to buy it?
They can buy it in bookshops. It's out. So Waterstones definitely have it, because I've been ssneaking in signing copies. You can get it on Amazon, but preferably get it from your local bookshop if there is one, or bookshop.org, which is a website that sells books online and delivers them to your house, but the money goes to your local bookshop.
Oh, cool.
So depending on where you are, it distributes part of the profits to your local bookshop. So your local bookshop supplies it and they deliver it. Okay. So it's like buying it, almost like buying it somewhere independent. So I'm a big fan of small bookshops and independent bookshops. So if you can do, that's a good place to get it.
That's
really
very
cool.
nice.
That is really cool.
So I think there were two main topics in the book that Batch and I love to speak about on the podcast. One of which is why we age. Without giving that away too much, you know, so that people are still intrigued. Tell us about why we age. And
so aging doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
From a biological point of view, things getting older and worse is not good for the individual and probably not good for the species in general. But it's actually unavoidable, unfortunately. So there's lots of reasons. Aging is a multi sort of complex situation, and your lifestyle and everything, but there are some things inherent in how our cells work means that you are going to age regardless of what you do. There is no way of living to 1,000. It just can't happen. So when your DNA replicates, so every time your cells divide, which they do, some of them do quite a bit, it needs to make a new copy of the DNA. So DNA is like a big long string, and the thing that actually copies your DNA, that makes the new strand, needs to have a piece of it to hold on to when it starts. It needs to have a bit that it starts on, but it can't copy the bit that it starts on. So your DNA gets very, very slightly shorter every time it's copied. So it's like, you know, it's grabbing onto this rope and it's copying all the letters along, but it can't see the ones under its hands. So there's a piece. So our DNA has what's called telomeres. So these are long bits on the end, kind of like the bits on the end of your shoelaces.
Yeah, the aglets on your shoelaces.
Aglets, yeah. And so they protect it because that's not needed for the cell to function. It's just there as a thing for the DNA copier to grab onto.
Yeah.
But when that's worn away, it starts into bits of your DNA that your cell needs, and your cell can't function without its copy of DNA. So what happens is that cell goes into what's called a senescent state. It kind of shuts down, it stops functioning properly, and it doesn't quite die, but it doesn't work properly. So this is where your tissues start to age. They become senescent. And the worst thing about senescence is it's actually contagious. It's kind of like moldy fruit in a fruit bowl. If you've got one senescent cell, the ones nearby it will start to get senescent. It sets out sort of stress factors. A lot of the time your body will clear senescent cells away. It'll destroy them and take them away, but they don't get replaced. So this is why, you know, your collagen ages, so your skin starts to go, all of this. There's an inherent clock ticking in every human, and there is no stopping it, unfortunately.
So there's no way of bypassing that?
Not yet. So there's a lot of anti-aging research. So a lot of anti-aging research. And it's not just telomeres. This is just one of many factors. But a lot of anti-aging research is trying to figure out a way of, you know, artificially changing this, either by sort of gene therapy or something. But the problem with messing with telomeres and cell division is if you get it wrong, you get cancer.
Oh, crikey.
Because uncontrolled telomere or uncontrolled division is what causes cancer. So if you mess up something to do with cell division, it can have serious consequences. And the other thing is that there's lots of other factors. So they found sometimes, and the two words that are most dangerous in any medical study in mice, which are not like humans, they're not exactly like humans, that sometimes they're able to change this and they're able to affect the longevity of mice. But it's like really, really early days. I would imagine probably not in our lifetime or our children's lifetime, but maybe, just maybe, we'll be able to make it a bit better in the long term.
It's interesting because a couple of episodes ago, so only a few weeks ago, we were speaking about some article that had gone out. I don't know whether you had seen it. And the problem I found was that when I was looking at sources for it, they all tended to be sort of like Daily Mail type things rather than any academic or scientific journals. But they were speaking about this pill that they'd given to dogs, that the aim of the pill was to lengthen telomeres, and it supposedly turned these healthy dogs, unhealthy dogs, healthy again and looking a bit younger. But I was wondering whether you'd heard anything about this stuff in the news, whether you think that's anything that could come quite soon.
I haven't heard it. If that's what they're claiming, that it reversed aging, I'd be super skeptical. Preventing aging is, I think, a way more likely outcome. I think once cells become senescent, once the tissues have gone down, I don't think it's really possible. Now, it may be. I may be way wrong on this, but I think if I was going to aim this and I was going to aim at something, I would be, you know, aiming at a young animal and trying to make it live longer rather than an old animal and trying to make it young. I don't think you can turn the clock back, but maybe I'm way wrong. Maybe they've come up with, you know, some miracle thing that everybody will pay £1 million so they can live to 200.
Yeah.
But I would imagine that's probably not the case. Also, if it's in dogs, that's super suspicious because dogs are not a standard test animal.
Yeah, that's true. That is an interesting animal to go for.
Yeah, I'll have to. I'll see if I can dig into spend some like actual groundwork time in figuring out where the original source of this claim came from.
I know I was, you know, I put caveats on the in mice thing. There's a reason why we use fruit flies and mice and nematodes. It's because they're called model organisms, and they're not just model organisms for no reason. They're usually easy to keep in the lab. They've got lots of advantages. But the main advantage is that other scientists are working on the same animal.
Right.
So you build up a big background of information on wide range of topics. So this is why anybody who's doing it in a weird animal, not even a weird animal, something like dogs that aren't commonly used, there's not as much background information. So it's very, very hard to build the full picture. Science is tiny little blocks all put together. Everybody works on one tiny minuscule thing, but it adds together into a big picture. It's kind of like pixels. And if it's not done in one of the standard model organisms, then there's a lot more questions than if it is.
That makes sense, actually. Yeah. So, say in the future, we did find a way to lengthen the average lifespan of a human, like you reduce aging, whatever. Do you think that will be something they make widely available? Because then that comes with so many more complications.
Have you met humans? They will absolutely not. They will sell it to the richest people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unfortunately, like even if it was free to make, they will make it exclusive and difficult. You know, like this is a completely out there example. I lived in Canada for a while and I had to pay for caller ID on my phone because it was an added extra. Now, I know people who work in the telecoms industry. The GSM signal sends it as standard. So they would have had to actively remove caller ID, which they did, so that they could charge people. It cost them money to remove it just so they could charge people because they had to do it actively. Humans are awful.
Do you not have a free market there? So do you not have another company going, well, I'm going to offer you the same contract, but I'm not going to charge you to...
I don't know what it's like now. This was quite a while ago. But at the time, I think there was 7 networks and 3 companies owned all 7.
Oh, wow.
Right.
So there was allegedly a free market, but they wouldn't let any non-Canadian companies in. It was a legal thing at the time. There wasn't wide competition. And it was ludicrously expensive. They charged you to receive calls and texts. It was completely bonkers. Now, it is quite a long time ago, so it's probably changed now. But at the time, it was easily 4 or 5 times more expensive than Ireland was for phones. It was nuts.
Wow.
Do you think if there was, let's say that there is a pill that is made and it costs barely anything to produce, do you think the way we work in the UK where we have the NHS and it's government funded, that they would sort of take a similar approach as they did with COVID vaccines and say, if we keep everyone young, they're much less likely to develop all of these far more expensive to treat illnesses and stuff, and therefore we as the government are going to give this out for free? Or do you just not think that's going to happen?
The government don't own it. They have to buy it. The government don't get these drugs for free. If some company did get it, what you would need is you would need a scientist like Jonas Salk. You would need someone who is so selfless that when he first developed sort of using insulin to treat diabetes, he made it available to everyone. Whoever discovers it would need to actively say, do you know what, as part of the deal for a pharmaceutical company getting this, you would need to make it like widely available and cheap. But that's not how drug development works. Drug development is extraordinarily expensive. It costs vast amounts, like many, many millions to bring any drug to market. So they would want to recoup and they would see this. How much would you pay to be the age you are now when you're 50 or 60 and your knees don't?
That's
a
true.
tremendous
The amount
amount
of money people will pay.
I would literally sell my house right now to have the physical ability that I had when I was 20. And I wasn't athletic. I wasn't like, it wasn't part of my job or anything. So imagine you're a pro footballer and you're 35.
Yeah.
And someone says, do you want to go back to physically being 18 but still have the skill and knowledge you have now?
Yeah.
They would pay £100 million for it. No problem. But I don't think it would be good for society. Going back to this, I think if people could live forever, we'd stagnate as a society.
Yeah.
As much as I personally would love to live forever, I think it would be bad for humanity as a species.
Yeah.
Also, with people are still going to have children. We have a huge problem with the number of people on the planet already.
Yeah.
Like if there's no turnover, if there's no exit and everybody's just piling in the entrance, where would everybody live?
Yeah.
What would they eat?
Yeah.
Well, when we speak about this, we always say that we'd like to think that we'd be interplanetary at some point as well, and hopefully that could relieve some pressure. But
Interplanetary where? This is a serious problem. Mars is by far the most likely other planet that we could live on. have you ever seen Mars? It's grim.
Yeah.
Like, even if we somehow come up with a way of, growing food there and having water, it's not a hospitable place. It's cold, it's dark, it's dusty, there's no water,
There was an article as well recently about they're trying to figure out how to essentially make concrete efficiently on Mars, and they're planning on using urine at the moment.
Great.
Don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah,
So just in a house of piss blocks, basically.
Piss block, no atmosphere.
A miserable, no atmosphere.
I live in piss.
Dark red sunset every night and day.
Like, have you read the book or watched the movie The Martian?
Yes,
Yeah.
I've seen the movie.
Brilliant.
Like, now that is possibly attainable. There's a couple of problems, but generally the science in that is reasonably okay. The storm at the start couldn't happen. That's the biggest flaw with it, because Mars' atmosphere is too thin.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's reasonably okay. That's the level of existence we're talking about. It's like domes with a limited amount of food. Do you know how much land and water goes into making your food?
Yeah, that's true.
It's epically large. If you look how much, say, a burger costs in terms just of water, how much water goes to feeding to the cow, to watering the plants, to the pesticides, evaporation, all that kind of stuff. It's like gallons, liters and liters and liters to make a single burger.
Tropicana used to have it on their carton. I don't know if you remember, and it used to say it took 80 litres of water to produce this.
Yeah.
Because the amount of water that goes into the trees and then up to oranges
it's
and
vast.
stuff.
So, if you're you probably would have a very restricted diet in a cold, dusty place.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to have 10 billion people on Mars. Unless there's some scientific leap where we get replicators, kind of Star Trek style. I just don't see it.
Well, I remember seeing, I can't remember if it was an interview with Elon Musk or something like this ages ago, where he said the way there is a possibility of terraforming Mars where you basically nuke both of the poles. And because there's this, I don't know if they've got, what is it? What's CO2, the physical form of CO2?
Dry ice.
Dry ice, yeah. That something about that, releasing that and everything, and you create an atmosphere, and then eventually it will start to terraform, and then you can create like an Earth by essentially nuking either end. But it just sounds ridiculous.
You were speaking before about not being a big fan of Elon Musk.
Yeah.
So bring up Elon Musk, nuke the poles, and we'll all live there happily ever after. Okay, Elon.
I would take that as seriously as a toddler telling you Elon Musk is not as clever as people think he is.
Yeah.
There's huge other problems. Massive nuclear radiation is going to be a problem if you use a lot of nuclear weapons. There's not that much dry ice. Do you know how much gas fills your atmosphere? The sun strips away, millions and millions of kilograms every second from our atmosphere, and we don't even notice. You're talking about vast amounts. And there's other problems. It's not just the atmosphere. That's a big problem. But the sun is really far away from Mars. Have you seen the Curiosity rover? It's a tiny little, nearly blue dot. It's never going to get very warm. Plants need a really large amount of sunlight. So that means you have to have constant daylight lamps to grow everything. And you have to ship them from Earth.
Yeah.
And it's really, really hard to get stuff off Earth. When NASA and other space agencies are putting together payloads, they could put it down to the gram because of how much energy it takes to get it off planet. Now, if you have to ship up, I've seen some of the rigs they have at football games just to put over the grass to keep it growing. They're huge. You'd need thousands, tens of thousands of rockets just to ship the lights up. And then you'd have to build a nuclear reactor up there, because how else are you going to get the power? The solar power that's there is minimal because the sun's so far away.
Yeah.
It's it can do basic stuff, but it's not going to be enough to run lights, because eventually you have to have, there's a conservation of energy problem with the laws of physics. You'd have to generate vast amounts of energy. It's not impossible. And as humans, we could do it. But I think we would have to bend pretty much the entire world's economy towards that goal at the moment, unless we come up with some better way of space travel. Mind you, the classic thing that physicists always say, fusion power is only 20 years away. It's been 20 years away from my entire life. But if we get proper fusion power, maybe we could do it. Yeah, but I just don't see it.
I'd be interested to know your opinion on AI and whether that will have a massive impact over the next 10 years. Do you think, right now, let's say fusion power is 20 years away, but with AI becoming as powerful as it is or as smart as it is in the next 10 years, do you think it's genuinely within our reach.
One of your statements was incorrect. AI is not smart.
It's
Powerful.
also
It's powerful, but it's not smart. It's not clever.
not yet.
And it's very unlikely to ever be actually intelligent.
Oh, do you think?
To ever. That's an
Like,
interesting
it's
one.
very, very good at processing data. It's very good at making inferences.
Mm-hmm.
But being creative and coming up with things, it gives the illusion of that. But the algorithm is limited by itself. So it's definitely a tool that we should use, and it can definitely make things a lot easier. I don't see why we as humans work 5 days a week as standard.
Yeah.
If AI can take away, like people saying, oh, it'll take away jobs. Why doesn't it just make our jobs easier? Why don't we have, 3-day working weeks? And there's a lot of like fear around AI, and rightly so, because, it will take jobs. But every technological advance in history, people have got mad because it's taken jobs. There was the Luddites breaking up loom machinery in the UK because it was taking weavers' jobs. That's it. It's the same thing. It's just the next generation of that. But I think people need to be more optimistic about AI, about the opportunities it will offer us, in the same way that increasing processing power of computers has changed how we do things. It's made us way more efficient. It's made a lot of things much easier. Let's keep rolling with that. I think we should look at it as, this might be the way that my life at the end of it, or my children's lives, will be way better than mine is. Why not? But I don't think, as it stands now, it's ever going to make scientific breakthroughs. I think it will help scientists make scientific breakthroughs.
You don't think by itself?
No.
Because, I mean, I know you said you weren't superstitious, but do you believe there's anything more to any of us three than just cells and chemistry?
No.
So why could we not create a machine that is essentially does everything our brain is doing, but just more efficiently?
We genuinely could, but that's not what AI currently is. In
Yeah.
its current form, I don't think it's got that potential to genuinely replace human thought.
But do you think
it
that we
augment
can
it and
create
help.
something that has the form to replace human thought?
It's within the realms of physics, yeah, no problem. But I just don't think we're anywhere near that yet.
Yeah.
I think it's like, even in the last couple of years, it's got so much better. When the first sort of chat GPT models came out, they were terrible. They were fun, they were funny, and you had a laugh, and they were good at some things and terrible at others.
Yeah.
But now it's way better, and people should use them. But you should use them as a source in the same way that we use like Wikipedia. You fact check, you do your due diligence. You don't just go, okay, ChatGPT, write my essay for me. You go, ChatGPT, give me some facts about this, and then you double check them. When it first came out, one of my mates, who's a computer scientist, got it to do a biography of me, and it was complete nonsense. But it sounded very convincing. It said I won the Irish version of University Challenge. I didn't. I wasn't even on it. It said like all.
Laura, delete that from the notes because I asked ChatGPT. No, I'm joking.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised, because a lot of people do. And there's a lot of false information out there, and it's not able to tell. So, classic example: my birthday is not the 27th of September. My friends from university put that on my wiki page, and I think it's down now finally, because I've railed against this for a while. And the Chase official account on social media thought it was true, and they wished me a happy birthday on the 27th of September. And everybody went, "Oh, it's your birthday, happy birthday!"
Yeah.
And people still think it is. So I tell people it's not my birthday, and I don't tell people my date of birth, because one of the first rules of the internet is you don't give out identifying information, because people can steal your identity. You don't give out your date of birth. You really shouldn't. You don't give out your address. So people get really mad about this, but ChatGPT doesn't know that. So if it's looking at me, it thinks I'm born then, because that's when, the people online are saying happy birthday to me, and as far as the information it's given. So it's that critical analysis of information and making those kind of decisions that it's really bad at. And that's the point currently where we're at. So I think humans still need to be involved in that step. But when it comes to collating the information, it's brilliant. You really should use it. Like it's genuinely good. Like I'm doing a charity quiz in a few days, and one of the rounds is going to be a ChatGPT round. I'm going to go, I asked it for 10 general knowledge questions.
Yeah.
And I'm going to fact check them, and the ones that are wrong, I'm going to say, it gave me the wrong answer. Which one do you think it gave me?
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Because I think people both under and overestimate AI.
Yeah.
they underestimate how useful it can be, but they overestimate how accurate it is, how good it is, and they overdo the fear of it. I think in quite a big way. We should be optimistic about it. It's a new tool.
Students, I'm sure, because so you're in the University of Oxford at the moment, correct?
No, was.
Oh yeah,
I've
you
finished,
said you just finished.
Yeah.
How long ago was that?
Last year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so my lab moved to Glasgow,
cool.
and I didn't go. I not moving to Glasgow. I had,
No.
and I was planning on leaving anyway. The TV stuff had got to a point where I was really part-time, and being a part-time scientist is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
You can't set up experiments anymore. I hadn't done experiments in like years,
Yeah.
2 years or something, 3 years. So I got to the point where I was administrative and managerial more than anything, and I just didn't really want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I was going to ask about AI use at university. Was it around a year ago when you were still there?
Yeah. No, my
people
my boss was always into it. We used machine learning to analyze very complex data sets. So we have a paper on that actually. So royally, I wasn't involved in this. I'm not much of a programmer. But so we had videos of fly brains that we kept alive for several days and watched them dividing, and we'd mark different cells. And we were able to use machine learning and AI to track the daughters of every cell, the cell lineages, in like 4D images, so 3D stacks over time. A human doing that would break. You would literally, it would just be the hardest thing to do. It would take thousands of hours.
Yeah.
You'd have to go through each frame carefully, mark them, all that kind of stuff. We were able, one of the programmers in my lab, Martin Hailstone, he built a program to track it called cytosenses, and you train it really quickly, and it was able to do it with like much greater than 99% accuracy. So
Wow.
So we've been using it for years.
Yeah. The current state AI is at now. Do you see it becoming? I mean, to say smarter than a human is so vague. I guess that's not something that you can really just
Measuring and quantifying intelligence is not possible.
No. So it's like people often say by this period AI will be smarter than humans, but is that really
Smarter at what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's already better at humans in some tasks.
Yeah.
You know, it just is. And especially if you bring in things like machine learning for any large scale repetitive task, that's what computers are brilliant at.
Yeah.
They're absolutely ace at it. So if you've got facial recognition software or trying to find patterns in things, it'll find them. You know, it's brilliant, and it'll do it in an instant because it's able to do lots of very simple checks over and over and over again. And on a big enough data set, it'll be really accurate.
Yeah.
But big enough data set is kind of key. If it's a small data set, most of those models really struggle. So the AI bots that we talk to have the entire internet, which is a very large data set, and they're able to narrow down and search it really quickly. But if you give it something a bit more niche, a bit more difficult, it'll give you an answer and it'll sound confident, but it probably isn't going to be right.
Yeah.
I think the measurements of intelligence in general are a hugely flawed way to look at intelligence. I don't believe in IQ. I think it's nonsense. And it's a question I get asked a lot. I've never taken an IQ test because IQ tests are for people who are good at IQ tests.
Yeah.
That's all they measure. Now, there is going to be a slight correlation with intelligence because you'll know more stuff. But in general, measuring intelligence is a fool's game. I know people who have never read a book in their life, really good friends of mine, people I've met who are academically terrible, but are brilliant at people skills and problem solving and spatial awareness. There's many, many different types under lots of different situations. So I don't think we can ever say anything is smarter than anything else, never mind AI and humans. It's too big a question.
Yeah.
Well, I actually might blow your mind because I have the perfect way to measure intelligence. We have a fun little game that we play on this podcast from time to time. We haven't really got a name for it. I feel like we should have catchy names for it rather than just being like science headlines that you can complete with multiple choice. I don't know.
It's too long-winded.
Yeah, it is.
Needs a nice title.
But essentially, we like to find science headlines and basically, it's usually just Batch and I'll just quiz him. Yeah. So I've got 2 science headlines from stuff that's been in the news recently. I'm going to read out the headline and you can fill in from the multiple choices. So, I mean, I hope you haven't heard these as well. You're both. I always worry that I'm going to say something you will have seen it. First up, in Atlanta, Georgia, marine biologists are helping marine wildlife by dumping what into the ocean? Is it A, coffee mugs, B, frisbees, C, trains, or D, a mix of manure and freshly cut grass? So feel free to have a conversation. This isn't a quiz where you have to buzz and just say your answer.
The most likely thing here is if this is in Georgia off the sea, they're trying to build artificial reefs, which is something that a lot of scientists have done. That would be my thought. So I would think trains is the most likely.
Yeah.
Dumping frisbees into the ocean makes no sense. They float. That's true. But it might be putting them on the top for some reason.
Yeah.
But I would think dumping loads of plastic in.
What was the manure and grass cuttings?
A mixture of manure and freshly cut grass.
So that would be to boost minerals, maybe, but that's actually bad because it would lead to eutrophication. So you'd get algal blooms and things. And generally that's frowned upon.
Yeah.
And coffee mugs, how many coffee mugs would you actually need to make a difference?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, coffee mugs.
I think based on will it sink and is it big?
Yeah.
Is going to be a part of this because the scale that you need to impact any ecosystem in the ocean is large. So I would think old trains, but I'm not basing that on any knowledge, just on...
I was thinking the same thing, just thinking like if you look at an old shipwreck and how much marine life is around that, it just makes sense that maybe they chuck a train in. Are they chucking trains in off the coast of Georgia?
I think we'll go with that, but I'm not confident at all.
Yeah, I think train one.
You are correct. It is trains. I was trying to think of things. I was like, what are the different... So I was thinking with coffee mugs, it would be a much smaller version. Maybe sort of like the way hermit crabs can sort... Yeah, little critters. Or frisbees, exactly like you said. I was thinking sort of like a protection, almost like a canopy. Though you sort of have like lily pads in a pond, thinking I might
They
catch
wouldn't
you
stick
in that.
though, they'd move.
Yeah.
They just go.
And you're right, they're almost all plastic, aren't they? Which is diabolical for the environment.
It's like, do you ever see the Garfield phones thing?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so you know the cartoon character Garfield? There was a shipment of Garfield phones in the 80s, I think, that went down. And, and periodically... a random Garfield phone washes up on a beach. Still
to this day.
Still happens.
Every now and then you get Garfield
That's
phone
so funny.
turn up. Oh, that's so funny.
Oh my God. I bet they're worth some money now when they wash up.
Yeah, there's several thousand.
There's probably some collector out there who probably would enjoy them for a couple of quid.
That's cool.
The Georgia Department of Natural Resources Reef Project sunk 2 train carriages 65 feet underwater in an effort to help marine wildlife, hoping that they'd serve in an artificial reef, providing structure and shelter for a variety of aquatic organisms. When they returned in August, they found coral growing and at least 9 species of game fish thriving. So, very cool.
Nice.
You were correct.
That is cool.
Number 2. These are both biology, so I did think you'd be good at this. Paris Zoo have a new display featuring the Blob, an intelligent slime mold.
Cool.
Which of the following bizarre features does the Blob not possess? 720 sexes, finger-like protrusions that help it travel up to 5 millimeters per hour, a nervous system containing over 100 different brain-like structures, or a plasma membrane which it essentially uses as its mouth.
I actually saw a video on TikTok of
slime molds are brilliant.
Slime mold recently.
So they did the one with the Tokyo transit system. Have you seen this?
I did.
Oh yeah, that's really interesting.
And they put it onto a blank model of it, and it grew in the same shape because it's the most efficient way to get around.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
So they are kind of cool. So out of these, a plasma membrane that functions as its mouth is probably quite likely.
Yeah.
Because it's amoeboid and that's probably how it swallows its food. I don't know that, but I would think that's probably quite likely to happen.
Yeah. What else did we have?
Let's go through them. 720 sexes.
Sexes.
Yeah, what do you think about that?
I know that there's some creatures that have a really wide range of sort of different sexes, but I'm not sure 726 is possible. It might be.
Yes. 126.
So it's not in any way just male and female, in especially once you get down to molds and stuff.
Yeah,
and they have to have matching ones within the species, so it ends up being like a subspecies.
Mm.
Okay, what were the others?
720 sexes. B is finger-like protrusions that help it travel up to 5 millimeters per hour.
They can definitely grow really quickly. I would believe that.
Yeah,
I think that's probably right.
Yeah, and then what was the other one?
A nervous system containing over 100 different brain-like structures.
So brain-like structures is very vague.
Yeah.
They're unlikely to have a properly functioning nervous system, but I wouldn't be surprised because of how they react to their environment if they've got local processing centers of some kind.
Yeah.
This is hard, actually. I would believe all of these.
Yeah. The only one that I doubt the most is probably the sexes one.
Yeah, I think so.
The rest make more sense to me.
I think it's either the sexes or the nervous system. But yeah, let's go with the sexes.
Okay. Let's do that.
You both want to go the same answer?
Let's go with the sexes.
You are unfortunately incorrect.
Oh, what is it?
So the answer is C.
The
nervous
nervous system.
system.
it's
So
the nervous system.
the slime mold has neither a brain nor a central nervous system nor any neurons. However,
Nothing.
interestingly, some scientists argue they exhibit intelligence since they can learn from experience and change their behavior accordingly. A recent study showed that slime molds will eventually learn to avoid caffeine, a harmless but offensive substance, through a simple form of learning called habituation. They can even pass on this knowledge to new cells when they fuse and join the blob. They can another study even suggested that they can solve the traveling salesman problem. I hadn't heard of this. I meant to, if I had more time, click on it to see what that was. Are you aware of the traveling salesman problem?
It sounds familiar, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, one for another podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, despite its name, it's not actually a mold, a fungus, a plant, or an animal or bacterium. It belongs to a kingdom of life called Protista.
Without any brain, nervous system, anything, how does it operate?
That's a very big question.
That's really interesting.
Well, there's quite a lot of protists, like, things like amoeba don't have central brains.
Yeah.
And they're not very sure how they make decisions. They have chemical reactions to stimulus and stuff. But that's why I wasn't sure about it. I was thinking, do they have some other, like, not a neuron, but some other subcellular thing that's brain-like or neuron-like that is able to make decisions. But yeah, no, it's
That's really interesting.
they are absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, really
they
cool.
are. They're a lot cooler than their name suggests.
Yeah.
But they did not
slime
have good
mold.
PR at all.
Yeah, the blob.
Yeah, the blob as well, calling it the blob. Yeah, because I saw a video on TikTok of this thing on a rock and it was moving around and people were like, what is this? Because it was just like this blob of slime just moving around, finding a path.
Yeah, just the fact
Really
that they're
interesting.
all like individual organisms and they sort of allow new ones to join their colony, and the fact that they move with finger-like protrusions. I mean, I take it that's just members of that colony.
No, it's just it stretches out, so it's like a blob, and a bit of it goes out.
Yeah, but as in that finger-like protrusion is just made up of a bunch of different individual.
Oh, are they individuals like built?
Yeah,
into...
so Protista are single-celled. Is that correct? Yeah.
So it's they're really, really like they're way more complicated and way cooler than they look. They do literally just look like a big blob of slime, but
they're all individual. So they're all. I mean, how some of them know
organisms.
to join the part of the finger that protrudes, and
there's probably someone right now whose job is trying to figure exactly that.
Yeah. Studying the blob in Paris.
Studying the blob.
There are worse things to do.
That's interesting that they've got that in the Paris Zoo. Then
yeah,
is that what that is? Paris Zoo. They've just got.
Well, it's alive.
I'd like to see what it looks like exactly.
I'd like to know what the exhibit looks like.
If you ever have a cold, sneeze into a hanky. It's just a blob, but they're usually kind of yellowy color. The ones I've seen anyway.
Yeah.
And they're just these kind of weird shaped blobs that kind of move around. They're really cool.
Yeah.
It's probably not far off like I was saying when I went to Amsterdam. Have you been to the Science Museum in Amsterdam?
No, I never have.
They have a sort of Miller-Urey experiment that's been going on for sort of like 5 years. And by itself, not much to look at because it's just sort of like a couple of glass jars and what looks like a bit of murky water. But it's actually reading the big, lumps of text that speak about the original Miller-Urey experiment and what they hope to find and all that kind of stuff in it. So I'm guessing it's a bit more.
I love those long-term experiments. Like the one in Oxford with the bell, the ringing bell.
What's that one?
So there's a battery under like a glass dome with like that rings a bell every so often. And it's been going for like over 100 years and they don't really know how.
Wow.
And they don't want to stop it.
No, I'd let it keep going.
So they're just letting
it keeps going and going and going.
Over 100 years.
Yeah, it's like really, really long time. If it's not over 100 years, it's close.
Yeah, it's close.
I think it is over.
Wow. That'd be kind of like a sad day, I feel, for locals when it stops.
When it finally
When
stops.
it finally stops.
Yeah.
a bit emotional.
I'd break down to tears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like when sort of like rovers and stuff, when they live out their lifespan and it's like,
sad,
this rover's out of battery and its wheels have stopped working and it can't. So it's just said goodbye for the last time and like sung itself happy birthday.
Yeah.
I was like tearing up reading this article.
Yeah, and the JPL, the propulsion lab in NASA, have them do things like sing happy birthday or they send a song saying goodbye. And It's really weird that actually. So when they had robots going around, I think it was libraries or something cleaning, they found that people were really mean to them and they pushed them out of the way and they kicked them. But they put plastic eyes on them and people suddenly
People
went,
changed.
Yeah.
No
That's
way.
crazy.
So
isn't
because it became more humanized or more
Yeah.
animalized and people changed their behavior towards them. And I think Wall-E probably has an awful lot to say
yeah.
about
I
why
love
people
that
think
film.
rovers are cool.
Yeah.
It's one of the best movies ever.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
so
it
absolutely
really is
brilliant.
great.
yeah, it's really good.
Sorry, that's very nerdy.
No, that's what this podcast is all about.
Yeah, that's true.
Been a nerdy episode, which is our favorite, really.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Appreciate
It's
it.
been fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah,
really
really
good
cool.
fun.
Really
We
cool.
don't really have many guests on this podcast, but I saw a few clips of you on the Jackmate one, and I was like, we need to get this guy on. So
Yeah, no, it's fun.
thank you for
Thanks
being
very
one
much
of our
for having me.
first guests.
Yeah.
And go buy The Body, 10 Things You Should Know.
Yes.
Out
Yes,
now.
do.
If you found this fascinating, wait till you read the book.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh, and maybe follow me. I'm on social media.
Yeah.
Don't ask. My handle is Bones Giles. It's my childhood nickname. I started with it and I can't escape.
Okay, so that's where to find him. The links to all of his stuff will be in the description, as well as links to the books and stuff. And yeah, thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.